Welcome to the Rising Latterly podcast.
Each episode, you will learn something fascinating so you can bring big ideas to your small talk.
Your growth is our growth. Listening to these episodes, subscribing to our weekly newsletter, engaging our posts on social media, and sharing our show with your friends and family is deeply appreciated as we work hard to expand this platform. You can also visit our page at buymeacoffee.com to contribute what you think the show is worth.
To the folks who are taking this step, we can't thank you enough. Look for the link in our show notes for more details about how you can support and follow us.
And now, please enjoy this episode.
Today's guest is Bill Small. Bill is an entrepreneur, a business coach, a personal coach, creator of the Awareness Advantage Workshop, a group training course in mindfulness, co-host of a new podcast, The Subtle Art of Not Yelling, and he's also spent many years of his life on the road as a touring musician. Thanks for coming on Rising Latterly, Bill.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, first thing I got to ask you, how'd you end up with your hands in so many different things? You're a busy guy.
I have absolutely no idea. I think it really just comes from once I started down the road of what I would call entrepreneurial musician, because that's really what most musicians are. I found that hard to stop. And I just try to always go where my interests and where something I actually like doing and feel like I'm good at take me.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And that led you to coaching. I would love to talk for a little while about that. You know, coaching is one of those spaces that can be pretty broadly defined, especially now. I feel like the lines between coaching and mentoring and training are blurring. I even have a friend that refers to his therapist as his performance coach, which might be a little bit of a euphemism, but I'm curious how you think about your role as coach and maybe, you know, the role you're playing in your clients' lives. Sure.
I actually define coaching and mentoring and teaching as three different things. They can overlap, certainly. Mentoring to me is more like if you are in an industry and you have someone who's ahead of you in that industry who might be able to help kind of guide you through the twists and turns of that. But it's more about them educating you by doing what they do and allowing you to watch. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, for sure.
A teacher has a curriculum that they share with you. A coach, I've always looked at it just like when I was on swim team when I was 12 years old. The goal was to go fast, to win the race. But I couldn't see myself swim. I could just do it. The coach could walk along the side of the pool and say, hey, you're doing something weird with your right arm. You're throwing it up too high, and that's going to slow you down. Try this.
Right. That makes sense.
It's really interesting.
You know, I can't see myself swim. I always tell people, and you can see it right at the top of my website, the only thing that gets in your way is you.
I saw that, yeah.
It's really hard to see how you get in your way. As a coach, that's my primary job with people, is to uncover how do you get in your way? And then what can we do about it?
Yeah, interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I like that analogy. And typically, like, how long does it take you once you start working with someone to maybe identify that blind spot?
Yeah.
Like, is it like a couple sessions, or does it, you know, as the relationship unfolds over a period of months, do more things reveal themselves? I think there, you know, I was joking about therapy earlier, but I think there is sort of some symmetry there. I feel like the longer you work with something, the more things come to the surface.
I would agree with that. I think that there's sort of a first deep cut, if you will, in looking at what gets in your way. And that generally with me arises somewhere in the first 6 to 8 conversations. Now that of course depends on the client actually doing whatever work I have them doing.
Yeah.
And actually being committed to that process and committed to looking deeply and finding out what's going on.
Totally. Yeah. You got to put in the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
And I think that's the other thing about it is that coaching is not consulting. You know, I don't do the work for the person. I can't jump into your business and do the work for you. I can guide you on how to do that work, how to present that work, how to show up inside of your work the best that you possibly can.
Yeah. Right.
But there's a difference in there.
You can coach somebody on how to run, but that person has to run their own marathon.
They actually have to do the
Yeah.
running. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the mentoring definition too, because it just reminds me of like, it reminds me of like a board member that you can lean on
Yeah.
for advice, but also their experience, and they can kind of talk about some of the pitfalls that are out there. So having someone like that in your network, which is something I've been thinking about personally. It's like I've been thinking about my network and who I could call on for certain situations.
Mhm.
And I've found in my own life that there are certain areas where I wish I had better support. And I'm actually like seeking that support. Like, oh, I wish I had someone I could just call right now to talk about XYZ problem.
Right.
And I noticed like, damn, I don't really have anyone in my network that I can lean on. So it's interesting to just have like a mentoring kind of circle around you. And going back to what Jay said originally, like you were doing so many things, I think it's really cool that you're like a Swiss Army knife. And part of what we do on this show is just, become a portal for, showcasing and exhibiting the entire human spectrum, right? So all different personalities, all different people, their entire path. I think it's really unique because people can relate. But going back to you specifically, you had mentioned that, you try to get your clients to think about what's getting in their way. What are some of the questions that you're asking to cue that conversation up or to get them to probe into themselves? And then in terms of the process, are you also having them do things like 360 reviews, asking them to ask their network for feedback? I mean, can you talk a little bit about the questions and the process that you take someone through?
Sure. It's interesting. If you look at it from one perspective, we all have, what's getting in your way, right? It's the thoughts in your head in general. I don't know how you guys feel about, I should have asked you before we started. I don't know how you feel about adult language, but your brain is an asshole.
Mm.
Your brain is constantly telling you things that you wouldn't let anyone else say to you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
If I walked up to you on the street and said some of the things that you allow your head to say to you, you would punch me in the mouth.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your thoughts come ultimately from your beliefs, from your belief system. And most people have absolutely no idea what their belief system actually is, especially when it comes to themselves.
Mm. Mm.
So one of the first things that I always do with clients is really take a look at what is that belief system. And that can oftentimes start with finding ways to uncover what are the stories that you're constantly telling yourself in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then where might that be coming from? Why those stories?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're no more true than anything else. Most of the things that your brain tells you are not actually true.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's just your head talking.
And you're a personal coach and a business coach. I imagine, as insofar as like a business is an extension of a person, especially if it's a small business or they're an entrepreneur. I imagine
Exactly.
a lot of that negative self-talk invades the way they think about their business as well.
Absolutely. It invades the way they think about their business, the way they handle themselves, the way they deal with their vendors, the way they deal with their customers, the way they deal with employees if they have them, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing you're hitting on right now is this idea of the belief system, which leads to this idea of having your own inner authority, or at least developing that, and then developing your own personal kind of value system. And
Yes.
when some of these components are missing, it often leads to what people associate with the midlife crisis. You
Right.
get to this point where you don't have a belief system, you don't know why you're thinking the things you're thinking. And that's why it's so important to get to a point where you can just have your own inner voice, your own inner authority, and own inner value system, and you know that that's your North Star.
And you made a really good point in that you were talking about looking at your network and thinking, okay, who can I go talk to about this or that? Honestly, that's the whole reason that I exist as a coach. As a business owner, who are you going to talk to? You can't talk to your employees if you have them.
No.
You can't work through problems with your spouse. Don't do that. Even if you have a business partner, sometimes that's not the best person to bring issues to. So I become the trusted advisor, the committed listener, the person who it's almost like a partner in the business without owning a piece of the business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true about just like if you are bringing issues to the business partner as well, it's like you don't know if they have blinders on.
Exactly.
It's like talking to the person who doesn't have a full perspective of what might be going on, because we're all just kind of blinded about like making sure this thing actually is successful.
And if you're just freaking out and you just need to talk to somebody and unpack what's freaking you out, don't go to your business partner when you're freaked out. You're just going to freak them out.
Yeah, totally.
That's not cool.
Yeah. Well, to use your analogy before too about swimming, it's like business partners are both in the water swimming next to each other.
Exactly.
So then they both need that third party perspective to look down on them. Yeah. And correct the strokes. No, it makes a ton of sense. I'm curious, like, I know that you got involved in coaching. There was a connection there between your introduction to coaching and the book, The Secret.
Mm.
I've heard of that book before. I think a lot of people would recognize the cover. It's that it has like the map on it. It's kind of brown.
Yeah.
It has the red wax seal. It's pretty recognizable. I remember one time my brother told me that Conor McGregor actually credited his incredibly fast acceleration in UFC to reading The Secret. He went from welfare to being like a UFC champion in just a few years by pulling from that book and harnessing its tenets. I'm curious if you could share with us and our audience a little bit about some of the big ideas from that book.
Yeah. So strangely enough, I actually got trained as a coach in the 90s doing some personal development coursework. And I had absolutely no idea that coaching was a thing you could do like for work. And in the 90s, people weren't really talking about that. It was something that we did inside of that business and we did with each other. And, but I came to realize later that what I received was pretty much the best coach training anybody could have. The ability to put myself aside and really listen to someone else and really hear what's going on. And then in 1998, I got a call from someone I knew from the 90s who was working for a company that was providing coaches for two of the authors that were in that book, The Secret. Both of these authors, one guy named Joe Vitale and another one named Bob Doyle, had their own books. And all of that material was based on what people now kind of call the law of attraction.
Got it. Yep.
Which has kind of gotten a bad rap over the years because people do weird things. People just do weird things. But these particular authors and their books helped a whole lot of people. And they wanted to have coaching programs so that they could help more folks, but they couldn't do it themselves. So this company was put together to provide coaches for them. And I got hired there, became one of those coaches. We actually developed the curriculum with them. So it was based on their books, but there was also some other stuff in there.
Cool.
In the first 6 months that I did that, I had 37 clients at once.
Wow.
And I can tell you one thing about that. You're either going to love that and know that that's something that you're good at and want to keep doing, or you're going to run screaming from the room.
Yeah.
I was the former. I absolutely loved it. It's the only thing I've ever done that I feel as good about as playing music.
Nice.
And of course, that was 2008. So by mid 2009, nobody was buying coaching courses, right? People were just trying to keep their houses, myself included. And so that company went away, but I hung out my shingle and just kept on.
Very cool.
That's amazing. I think everyone can like talk about their scars from 2008, to different varying degrees. And my personal scar is the fact that I graduated from college with a finance degree in 2008. So
that's nice. That's
awful.
perfect.
Yeah. So by the time 2009 rolled around, it's like maybe a few people are trying to hire you, but
it's time to go
not.
bag groceries. You do.
So I think we all have scars from 2008, but I think what you said was really interesting around the law of attraction and it getting a bad rap. Maybe it's because it's just kind of messaged inappropriately or inaccurately, because without action, then the law of attraction really doesn't work. And I think that's like the missing piece. Right? Most people just think like I could think about it and that's it. But
yeah,
it's
you
the
can't just sit
action.
on your couch and try to levitate and everything will show up to you. It doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. Yeah.
So
Totally.
with that context in mind, I'd be curious as to what your thoughts are. I know you practice mindfulness, you talk about it, but what are your thoughts to someone who might be saying that mindfulness is actually something that is covering up some real issues? Because mindfulness makes you look inwards. It makes you think about, the fact that really everything comes from you and you're kind of also responsible for fixing whatever issue you're in. Whereas you're being deflected and distracted from some of the societal issues that are taking place, or maybe the issues that are taking place in the workforce that are causing the real stress as to why you actually need to pursue mindfulness. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on like the counter argument to mindfulness.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. Mindfulness is the idea of mindfulness is not actually to cover up, fix, change, or otherwise deal with anything. It's really the ability to notice what's happening, to not be swept away by the extreme stream of thoughts and whatever else you may be experiencing. It's about allowing yourself to fully experience whatever you're experiencing without judging it, without needing to do anything with it. And when you do that, you get just a little bit of space so that you don't have to be quite as reactive. You can respond instead of react. I would actually say that if there's issues, what a great way to actually make a difference in them is to be able to have some space to be able to respond to those issues instead of reacting from whatever emotion or pain or anything else that might be coming up. One of the things that you pointed to, I think, goes back to when people give the law of attraction stuff kind of a bad rap, is that you're responsible, so you should be able to fix everything and all of that. And one of the first things actually that I make an agreement with all my clients, I say, listen, you are 100% responsible for everything in your life. I'm not saying that's true. Okay? I'm not going to tell you that's true. I don't know if that's true. I'm only saying it because it's the most powerful place to stand. If it's not coming from you, then you're a victim of it. And once you're a victim of something, you have no power to do anything. You can't change anything.
And you'll never hold yourself accountable in that situation.
Exactly right. And also, when I say responsibility, it has no association with blame, fault, guilt, good, bad, right, wrong. It's not about judging it. It's simply about saying, where can you actually make a difference? Instead of saying, oh, I'm stuck.
Yeah. I heard a metaphor, if you're in a car accident and you break your back and you're looking at 12 months, 18 months of rehab to get back to a place where you're actually functioning, it's not your fault that you're in that situation, but it is your responsibility to go to rehab, to take it seriously, try to get your life back. No one else can do that for you. So it's not your fault that this happened to you, but it is your responsibility to do something about it because you're the only one that can. I always thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, you have a choice on how to respond. That's where that whole responding versus reacting thing could really come in handy.
Yeah, and I imagine as a coach, you have to do that a lot, especially if you're seeing almost 40 people a day, people are throwing all these problems at you. You want to have time to digest them. You want to give them a thoughtful answer. It's something to do well. You can't just react with your first suggestion, the first idea that comes to mind. You really have to internalize it and respond with something constructive, I imagine, in order to be effective with your clients.
I think the biggest key, and maybe the thing that people don't get, I'm not going to say don't get trained in. What do I know? I don't know people. But here's what I think is the biggest key to that. And it does go along with mindfulness, is being present. So if you're my client and you're talking to me and I'm actively thinking about what I'm going to say next, I'm not present. I'm not with you. So I can't really respond to you in a way that's going to make a difference.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes I think that the most important thing for me to do is before I pick up the phone is to take my stuff, whatever I'm dealing with, and I just put it over to the side. It doesn't go away. It's going to be there when I get off the phone, but there's no reason for me to bring that onto my call so that I can just be fully over there with the person I'm speaking to in their world. And then usually the answers to whatever questions come up are pretty easy to find.
Interesting. And I imagine at this point you've built the confidence if that response doesn't immediately come to mind to just say that you need some time to think about it. I think maybe that's something that we don't do enough. We feel like we have to respond right in that moment. It's okay to take some time. It doesn't undermine your credibility or your competence to sleep on it.
No.
So being present, saying I don't know, or I can get back to you, or I need time to think about it. Those are a couple things that people could be doing more of. What else would you say people could be doing more of? And what should people be doing less of, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a big question.
Oh, we're here for big questions.
What should people be doing more of and or less of? Honestly, in my own mindfulness practice, which never stops, and I always want to learn more. And especially in the past 2 years, I keep coming back to really being focused on compassion.
Mm.
And I think oftentimes when you say that word, people hear some woo-woo hippie, ooh, compassionate. And that's not really what I'm talking about. But I think it's something that is really missing a lot. And when I say compassion, what I mean is compassion for myself first, and whatever I'm dealing with, and knowing that I'm just a human being dealing with being a human being. And then getting that you're just a human being dealing with being a human being.
Yeah.
And likely every day doing that the best way that you can at the moment. And I may not always dig what you're doing, and it doesn't mean I'm going to invite you over for dinner or we're going to hang out, but I could at the very least, feel that connection that we're both doing this. We're both every day waking up in this weird human experience and trying to get from morning to night every day.
Seriously.
So that's something people could be doing more of.
Yeah, I mean, and
100%.
every night we have a reminder. Just look up at the stars, and that'll be a reminder of how collective this experience is.
Yeah.
So that tomorrow morning, as you alluded to, you just go into the day, or whoever you're interacting with, just realizing we're all pretty much the same.
We are.
We're all doing really hard things. We're all trying to survive as human beings.
Well, I can tell you this. I've had clients in the United States, in the South, the West Coast, the East Coast, in Tokyo, in Amsterdam, in Spain, in the UK, and in Argentina. And every single person I've ever worked with is dealing with the same stuff. We're all dealing with the same stuff.
The language we speak might be different, but that language of being human is the same, if that makes sense.
The details are different, the circumstances are different, but underneath all that, it's all the same.
Yeah. And there's a huge amount of humility that comes with that too. You can, going back to the swimming metaphor, if you're trying to teach someone how to play guitar better, coach them on guitar, coach them on using their voice, which I know you've done in the past, and we'll talk about at some point here. You can get that third party perspective, but in terms of just being a human, no one has that bird's eye view. Like, we're all in the pool together when it comes to living our lives out. Maybe, some of us at times our ego gets inflated and we think we have all the answers, but at the end of the day, we're all in that pool together.
That's a fact.
Yeah, 100%.
So actually, Bill, you mentioned like this weird human experience. I love that because I also think it's a weird human experience. Another thing I think is weird are dreams. I think dreams are something that becomes, it's weirder the more I think about it. So my question to you is, what is something in your life, or what's something that you think about that becomes weirder the more you think about it, outside of being human?
Aging.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, aging is weird.
Why is that weird to you?
Well, I'm 55 years old.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you, I think. And it's weird. There's a big part of me that doesn't feel any different than I did when I was 15. I don't feel any different. I don't. I had this friend of mine, and I used to not understand what he was talking about. He's a great musician in Nashville. And this is the kind of guy, he's played on more records than you own. Like he's just, that's what he did his whole life. Played on records, did some really cool stuff. And when I met him, he was in his early 60s, bald, big old white beard, and he goes, man, I don't feel any different than I did 40 years ago. I wake up in the morning and I walk into the bathroom and I look in the mirror and I go, who's that? And I get it. I don't know that I look that much different than I did 10 years ago, but it feels different and the same all at the same time. And it's just a strange experience. And it's not something we really talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like there's times where I want to call up certain friends of mine and go, hey, was it like this for you? Or what does this feel like? Or how's this? But I'm not even sure they'll tell me because we don't talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think our culture has a very odd relationship with aging. I think we have a huge fixation on youth, at least from like a marketing and advertising perspective. There's a preponderance of young people in any given ad spot, and there's not much of like reverence, I think, for older people. Like we don't really have that archetype of like the sage old man or the sage old woman. It's kind of seen as like, once you're over, we have that expression like over the hill, like things, are going downward after a certain point. And, even I just turned 30 and, that's still very young in the grand scheme of life. And, I've had this sense of grieving that my 20s were gone, and I kind of had to snap out of it because it's like, dude, life is going to continue to get richer with time. Not, I'm not going downhill. Like that's a horrible way to think about it. So, yeah.
Well, the only time you see like older men in advertising is these old dudes that are really tan and really cut and have big old beards. And it's like, look how in shape this guy was. He was fat 5 years ago. Look at him now.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you. That's great. Awesome. I feel great about myself now.
Yeah. Before and after with Bosley.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jay, you mentioned something about marketing I think is interesting. I think marketing is one of those things where they hack into, the lapses that we have in terms of our rationality. We're pretty irrational people. Yeah. And so I'm just thinking aloud now, brainstorming that maybe they just focus on younger people because that cohort has not really understood that their brain could be hacked. And so while, we're all irrational, regardless of our age, maybe as we get older, we start to realize like, my brain is being hacked right now. I don't need to fall for that. But, a marketer's job is to identify our irrationalities and hone in on them and take advantage of it. And so
absolutely,
maybe one way is to just focus on younger people. This is just me talking. It's speculation. I don't know what I'm saying.
Well, honestly, the whole brain hacking part of it, it's one of the reasons that I started the podcast that I have with my buddy Miles Hansen, because Miles and I have both been through the ringer with the smarmy online marketing stuff, and both feel like there's a better way to do it and a better way to talk about it, and that there is a shift happening in the world of marketing where hopefully we can pull away from the more manipulative practices and actually work on connecting with people.
Interesting. And have you found, are there any kind of methods? I guess people will have to listen to your show to find out, but any methods you can share with us now of building a deeper connection while reaching out to people that are on the other end of the screen, maybe?
Well, in a way, it's not far from what you're doing right now. And I don't know how you interact with your listeners when you're not, doing this. I assume you get the occasional email or message from people. I hope you do. You should. You have a good show.
Thank you.
I think it's about being real with those people. And it's fine to sell stuff. We're all selling something.
Absolutely.
Right? But doing that in the most authentic way you can, and not being, there's so much copyright or language around selling stuff that I don't know about you, but I can smell that a mile away. You give me a video sales letter, I can tell you what's coming up next. I probably have some version of that on my computer that tells you exactly what's coming up next. I'm tired of that. That actually makes me walk away the minute I see it. Tell me a story. Connect with something that I'm passionate about, and tell me why that's important to you. Then show me what you have to sell me. And if it lines up with something that I feel good about and I need, great, I'll probably buy it.
Yeah. At the very least, attached to some sort of pain point. At the very least, get a sense of where they are today versus where their future expectation of their self is, or their business or whatever it is in the future, and then try to bridge that gap. And it's like the person needs to be convinced themselves that they have an issue and that issue needs to be resolved. There's no forcing, otherwise there's no sale.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, you talked about storytelling. I imagine you've honed that craft quite a bit over the years in your time as a songwriter. Do you remember, Bill, the first time you wrote a song beginning to end?
Yes.
When was that?
I was 11.
Wow.
And I don't remember the song, but I remember doing it. I wrote some sort of a lullaby when I was 11. I'm sure it was terrible. I think that from age 11 until somewhere in my 30s, mostly the songs I wrote were not great. I am very blessed in that I sing pretty good. I can play pretty good. So I can take a mediocre song and make it sound pretty good.
Nice.
But over the years, as I started to be around more songwriters and really look at songwriting in a different way, I spent a little time in Nashville, the capital of songwriters to some extent. It made me have to up my game and go, wait a minute, okay. All of this stuff was nice, but how can I really take it the next step? How can I really convey whatever it is I'm trying to convey?
Totally. And do you think part of that had to do, we were just talking about aging, with just getting more experience, life experiences under your belt?
I'm sure. Yeah. And seeing what connects with people from the stage, what connected, what song do they come up and say, man, I want to hear this one.
Yeah.
What was it about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think songwriting is fascinating. I think something that maybe distinguishes like songs from the 70s from some of the songs I grew up with in the 90s that were, more kind of grunge or just more kind of like prog rock. I feel like back in the day, people really wrote songs about something. Like you could point to what that song was about. It wasn't just kind of REM style collection of different interesting phrases. And I think, the songs that stand the test of time will be the ones where someone can tell you, who that song was about or what that song was about. There was a central character, there was a central narrative, instead of just kind of throwing different ideas at each other and saying how they fit together.
You may be right. I'm not going to say that those songs that sound like they're a bunch of things thrown together, that there wasn't a central idea. Because poetry is poetry. Some songs border more towards poetic, some songs border more towards conversational, and then there's a whole lot of stuff in the middle. There are certainly songs that I have heard, and I'm not going to call anybody out on the show,
Right.
but there are certainly songs that I have heard that I do not understand why anyone likes that. It doesn't resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's a whole bunch of people who like it. So it resonates with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, that goes back to what we were just talking about with connection, with marketing, with anything else. We were talking about coaching earlier, and now it's a big thing. There's coaches all over the place, and there's not a whole lot of, you don't go to school for it. There are some certifications. I don't have one. Does that make me a bad coach? Right? If you have one, does that make you a good coach? If you have a law degree, does that make you a good lawyer? I don't know. But I remember being at a networking event. And at those things, sometimes everybody gets up and they got like a minute to say something about themselves. And I was kind of towards the back of the line, and there were a lot of people. And there were 6 coaches in the room. It wasn't that big a room. So that's a lot of coaches. And I'd been to this thing before where I was the only one. All of a sudden, there's 6. And I'm at the back. By the time it was my turn to talk, anything I was going to say had already been said.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Me getting up there and being all coachy would have just been stupid. So what I said, and I meant it, is, hey, listen, there's 6 coaches here today. If you've ever considered working with a coach, talk to all of us. Because one of us will make sense to you. And that's the person you should think about working with. I probably don't do anything different than anybody else. But my clients, for whatever reason, resonate with me.
It's a connection. Maybe it's the fact that you're from Jersey. Who knows?
Maybe it is. I could start talking like this, we'd be fine.
That's what I love about you, because I'm from New Jersey as well. That's where my roots are.
Get out of here.
100%. Yeah. I love New Jersey, Jersey roots, global reach. That is kind of a mantra that I live by.
I love that.
Yeah, well, it's not mine. I'm not going to take credit for it. It was actually Rutgers University put out a slogan when I was there, and I will never forget that. I thought it was one of the most fascinating slogans. And then it's actually like turning out to be somewhat true, because I never thought I'd leave New Jersey. And then on Halloween of 2013, took a one-way flight to San Francisco and haven't looked back since. But anyway, I was thinking about something you mentioned, because you mentioned the word somebody, and how you just need to resonate with really one person. And whether that person is yourself, great, but another person, obviously that's better. And I was just trying to think about it in the sense of, like, how do you help people that are trying to operate a business? I want to go back to your business coaching real quick. How do you help someone who's trying to operate a business, but really doesn't have that acumen and maybe blind to seeing that? So my point is, like, we all, entrepreneurs, they want to go out and they want to build something, and maybe it doesn't pan out into something that makes them, wealthy or that they can live off of. So, like, how do you navigate that conversation with somebody, and how do you help somebody in that spot?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that if that's what's going on, there's 2 things that could happen. One is there are a lot of things about running a business that can be learned. Right?
Like,
well, such as how to deal with your taxes, how to hire a bookkeeper, how to make sure your bookkeeper isn't ripping you off, how to manage your employees, how to put systems in place to just keep track of things and make things easier. I've had people that are completely overwhelmed, and then I ask them, "Do you have a calendar that you use?" And they say no. I say, "Great. That's one of the reasons you're overwhelmed. Let's get stuff out of your head and onto a calendar or into a notebook or on a list or anything," right? Those types of things, while it sounds really simple, some people have never had to do that. A lot of people start a business because they're good at something and they go, "Oh, I can make money at this. Let's do it." Right? And so there's a lot of those little things. It can be as simple as a calendar. It can be as difficult as, or as complicated as, what's your business structure? You've been a sole proprietor. Does that still work for you? Do you need to now maybe switch and be an S Corp. These are all things that people can learn. If someone, and I may have had one or two of these, if they're really not a fit for being an entrepreneur, that's probably going to show up.
Yeah.
And it's not really my job to say one way or the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Just like as we're uncovering what gets in your way, it's not my job to tell you what that is. Now, you're going to see it. We're going to point to things. I'm going to suggest things. But if that really comes up for somebody, they're going to know. They're going to know. And then they can make whatever decision they need to make.
Running with that, though, Bill, I think there's a lot of people that are attracted to coaching. They see it as maybe a departure from like a more conventional career path, a little more autonomy, the opportunity to help people. There are a lot of things that are attractive about it. As someone in your seat, what perspective might you give to those people considering coaching as they do a little self-examination and figure out whether it's a fit for them? Like what do people not realize about the demands of coaching if they haven't done it yet?
Yeah. I think there's an awful lot of messaging out there, a lot of marketing, a lot of programming in selling coaching or selling coaches and potential coaches on programs to teach them how to get clients.
Oh, wow.
I see a lot of that. As a matter of fact, I'm the victim of a lot of that. You go to my LinkedIn, I get it every day. I don't even go on there anymore because I can't stand it and I can't make it stop.
Yeah.
What I don't see is people sending me or any other coach or other coaches continuing education or, hey, learn how to be a great coach. I don't see a whole lot of that. I'm not saying it's not out there. So what I would say is learn how to be a great coach. And whether that's a program, whether that's by having a coach. I know there are coaches who do that, who train other coaches. Whatever it is, that's the most important thing. Getting clients is getting clients. That's like selling anything else. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's not.
Yeah.
But it's really hard if you're not actually good at what you do.
Yeah. Something that's differentiated, something that's truly valuable, something where the client that you're working with feels compelled enough to go tell their friends about you. I mean, that's really important stuff. You mentioned can't make it stop. I'm going to just pick on that phrase for a moment because I think about that in the context of a larger topic I've been thinking about, which is groupthink. So, Bill, I'd be curious to know, is there anything you can think of that's going to stop the momentum and the avalanche that's taking place in society right now around groupthink? What do you think can stop that?
That's really interesting. I don't know that anything's going to stop groupthink because we are all connected and we are all going there is just a natural pull to find something that feels like it resonates with you or that you're connected to in some way and follow that, if you will. I think there's two things about it, though. One is that we may not be doing the best job in schools at teaching students critical thinking. That I've noticed this in the last couple of years with friends and relatives and people I know who have chosen whatever side of the political spectrum they've chosen, but seem to do it very blindly, that they pick this path they're going to follow and that's what they follow, and they don't look outside of that. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of that at times myself, because I think we often do stay where we're comfortable. But if we can teach ourselves and teach our children more about thinking critically, about seeing both sides of an issue, about researching, I think research is going to become more and more important. Because let's face it, you can't trust any source of news or information you get anymore. You just can't.
Yeah.
So you almost have to look at all of them, or at least a few, more than one anyway.
Yeah.
Read a book, read a book, look at several sources if you're truly interested in something.
Yeah.
I think that's
you hit on something there, because really the underlying question around groupthink is how can we find truth? And
Right.
maybe the way to find truth is through research, it's through critical thinking, it's that 360-degree perspective on something. And then part of that is, reading books, talking to people, listening to podcasts. I mean, there are definitely a lot of ways to go find the truth, especially in the context of groupthink.
See, but then you bring up this whole other problem of what is true.
Exactly. So
you know what I mean? And I told my kid 15 minutes, and we're not going to answer that one in 15 minutes. But, I don't know what is true. I know what feels true for me. And I know that there are events in history that were told to me as a child that were presented as fact. That now don't seem so factual to me, or at least not all the facts. I got like part of the facts. I didn't get all the facts, right? So we can't really search for the truth in something if we don't have all the facts. But I think the other part of this goes back, it winds all the way back to when we were talking about compassion. Because I don't need you to believe the same thing I believe.
Right.
And I can still like you. I can still even find love for you as a human being, even though you believe something different than me. I've met people who grew up in devout religions, who I don't believe the same thing they believe, but we hang out and we love each other. Right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm not part of the sort of group think, if you will, of their religion. I don't need to be. It's okay. So I don't think group think's going away, but I don't think it needs to divide us either.
Yeah. We earlier this summer we had on an author and kind of world explorer, adventurer, John Turk, who we were talking about the dark side of fiction and how narratives in the news media are presented to rile people up, to galvanize different groups. And he had a really interesting litmus test. I thought he said, if ever a story seems designed to make you angry, then treat it with a grain of salt. And there are certainly a lot of things throughout history that, and even in the present moment, that are, worthy of inspiring anger in us. But if the central thrust of the story is to make you angry, then, there's probably an ulterior motive there.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are angry and they don't know why they're angry. So when they hear a story that makes them feel angry, they can just say that's why I'm angry. When maybe it's probably not that at all.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, it's this idea of, again, accountability. Are you going to try to point blame all the time, or are you going to put the thumbs to your heart?
And maybe you just answered the question. Maybe how you take the power out of groupthink is self-responsibility.
Exactly.
It is being 100% responsible for you, for your values, for your responses, for your actions. Maybe that's how you take the sting out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you brought up that point earlier that we treat ourselves, the things we tell ourselves, we would never tell other people, or if other people were to tell them to us, we would be really angry. And I think there's also like a mirror image of that in some sense, where we don't always hold ourselves to the same standards we hold other people. Like we see the laziness in other people, but not the laziness in ourselves, or see the pettiness in other people, but we don't see how it's also manifesting in our own, with us, it's different. So I think there's a certain self-awareness that comes with compassion and humility.
It's really hard to see how you get in your own way.
Bill, you mentioned read a book. This is my final question. Jay might have another one, but what's a book that you've reopened recently and actually tried to read like in a deeper way, as opposed to just saying you read it?
Oh, that I've reopened. Wow.
Reopened. Yeah.
Okay, hang on one second.
Take your time.
Hang on. I know you're shooting video, but you'll be all right.
Yeah, this is all good.
So this is weird, okay? But in the 90s, when I was doing some like personal development kind of coursework, I started talking to my dad about it. My dad passed this year at age 94, right?
Oh, wow.
So he caught the tail end of World War II, served the last 2 years of the war.
Wow.
He was part of that generation.
Wow.
I'm saying that because when we started touching on belief systems, what's underneath, all of that kind of stuff, he was very taken aback and basically said, we don't talk about that. That's not what we do, which was very common, can be very common in that generation.
Sure.
And he said, look, I've already learned this. And he put 2 books in front of me. And this is one of them. I don't know if you can see that. It's called The Domain of Being. And it's basically an early book about ontology, the study of human being. Right? So I just opened this up, and it's by Celestine Biddle, which I think is where the Celestine prophecy came from, all that stuff, which I don't actually know a lot about. I'm guessing. I probably shouldn't have said that because I'm talking out of the side of my head. This was printed the first time in 1938.
Wow.
There you go.
So I just reopened this book. I'm going through it very slowly because the language is a little obtuse at times. But it's all really straight up. It's all exactly what I have learned and said a different way. So that always makes you think of new things. I always say I don't tell anybody anything they don't already know. I just say it in a way that makes them think about it differently.
Absolutely.
And that's what the book's doing for me.
It's all about shifts in perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that book with us. We'll be sure to put it in the show notes, Bill. I know we're at the 30-minute mark and you got to run, but we do ask all of our guests one final question here. If you could be any animal for a day, what would it be and why?
Oh, I'd be a dog. Without question.
Why is that?
Dogs
Your dog or any dog?
Well, if I could choose, I'd pick my dog because he's a spoiled, you know what. But almost any dog, man. Dogs have it made.
Oh, yeah.
Dogs are, they really are man's best friend. For the most part, I don't hang out with anybody who would like kick a dog. For the most part, they're treated very well. They have an amazing ability to just be wherever they are with whatever's going on. They're super present. They're not worried about what happened 5 minutes ago. Sometimes they're worried about what's going to happen in the future because they would like to get fed or go out or whatever. But the minute that happens, man, it's gone and they're just back to whatever. My dog actually smiles. Yeah. He does this. And it scares people if they don't know. Every time I walk in the door, he walks up and smiles at me. It's the greatest thing in the world. Why would I not want to be him?
Oh, hell yeah. That's awesome. That is awesome. Do you have something, Arjun?
No, I was going to say, I appreciate the time. I could see your kids tapping you on your shoulder. I want to be cognizant of your world. I mean, I think we can all agree that being a dog is great. And honestly, Bill, it's just like one of those things where I feel like this conversation, we covered a lot. People can definitely pull from it. This idea of focusing on compassion, being more critical in terms of thinking, and, kind of having this inner authority. I keep going back to that, right? This idea of understanding who you are, why you operate the way you operate, what's in your way. I think that's all really important stuff.
100%. Yeah, we'll be sure to put your links in our description as well so people can find you online.
Great.
Bill, it's really been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I could sit here and talk to you guys for another hour. It's fun.
I know, we could too.
We'll do round two. We'll do a round
All
two.
right. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can sign up for the Rising Weekly newsletter sent out each week.
Every Friday, we expand on the episode with insights, recommendations, and more.
You can sign up at risinglatterly.com.
Thank you.